Good evening. My name is Peggy Kell, and I'm the Voter Service Chair for the Oak Park River Forest League of Women Voters. Tonight, we are holding a candidates forum for the contested Oak Park Village Trustee Municipal Election. A recording of this evening will be posted on our website at lwvoprf.org and on the library's website for later viewing by voters. The league does not endorse candidates, but we do believe that voters should hear from those that are running to represent them. Our league has had candidate forums for contested races in Oak Park this year. You can visit our website calendar at lwvoprf.org to check the dates and the links to watch these videos of the previous forums. And you can also register for our other forums that are coming up, the President Forum after this, and the high school forum that will be in March. You'll be able to submit questions during this forum using the question function. The chat will be shut down. You can also maybe send them to our email address, which is lwvoprf1924@gmail.com. The forum following this will start at 8 o'clock. So we'll be done with this forum at about 7:45, maybe a little bit earlier than that. The Oak Park Library is our valued partner in this forum, and thanks to Rashmi Swain and Amelia Vargas for all their help with the technology for the event, and to Amelia, who will be our timer tonight. Candidates will start with an opening statements of 1 minute, followed by questions for all, finishing with 1 minute closing statements. We will start in alphabetical order and then rotate through the candidates. Candidates are Chibuike Enye, Jenna Jacobson, Lucia Robinson, James Taglia, and Joshua Vanderberg. So tonight we'll start off with the opening statements. Chibuike, you'll be the first one to start off.
Thank you so much, Peggy. My name is Chibuike Enya. I have been living in Oak Park since I was about 5 years old. I moved here from Chicago. I started my family here. My parents are still residents on the north side. I live here on the south side of Oak Park, very close to Irving Elementary School. I have two young children, a 11-year-old and a 16-year-old, maybe not so young anymore, but I'm running again for re-election because I think we still have a lot of work to do. I love the community I live in, but want to see it grow into so much more. I want to continue this great tradition that we've had, but I also want to see some things through, and we've had a great run at it, but I'm seeking all of your help in getting back into office and getting back to work. Thank you.
Thank you. Jenna?
Thank you. Thank you to the League of Women Voters for hosting this forum. Thank you to the Oak Park Public Library, Rashmi, for helping to host. Thank you, Peggy, for moderating, Amelia for keeping us on time. And I want to thank everyone who is at home watching, either live or on the replay. Participatory democracy can only work when we participate. So thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to be informed voters and participants in our local democracy. My name is Jenna Jacobson. I'm a mom, an educator, and a local advocate for gun violence prevention. I've been the lead of our Oak Park, Austin area Moms Demand Action Group for the past 8 years. And with that experience, I built a strong track record of collaboration across agencies and organizations here in Oak Park. I'm running for village trustee because I believe deeply that government should be one of the ways in which we take care of each other. And at this moment, when the federal government is targeting all of our rights, most acutely those most vulnerable, I want to do all I can to protect this community and help build a more inclusive, just, and safe future for all of us.
Thank you. Lucia?
My name is Lucia Robinson, and I am a current village trustee running for re-election. I've lived in Northeast Oak Park since 2007, where my husband and I have raised our 3 children. But I first moved to Oak Park when I was 12 years old from Chicago's Little Village neighborhood, one of the oldest and largest Mexican and Mexican-American communities in the city. I spent my early childhood in Little Village living with my parents and grandparents and siblings and some extended family in a 2-flat building. And this experience has really shaped my entire life because my grandparents were our family's first generation in this country. And watching their dedication and sacrifice to make a better life for all of us has informed all of my decisions at the board table. And it really centers my understanding and it motivates me to uphold our core community values, diversity, inclusion, public safety, and others, because they're what help our residents build better lives for their families and what makes Oak Park a better community for all of us.
Thank you. James?
Good evening. My name is James Taglia, and I'm a lifelong resident of Oak Park. I've dedicated myself to serving our community, including 6 years on the township board and 6 years on the village board. Throughout my tenure, I have worked to pass fiscally responsible budgets that maintain the high level of services our residents expect while keeping taxes predictable. I'm running for re-election to continue this important work, ensuring that Oak Park remains a vibrant, inclusive, diverse, and financially stable community for everyone. I also have the experience and collaboration skills to be an effective trustee. I'm always accessible by residents at any time, day or night. If you reach out to me, I will respond. If you have a problem or an issue, I will get involved until the issue is resolved. That's a promise. I take the job of being a trustee very seriously, and if reelected, I will once again work hard for all of Oak Park. Thank you.
Thank you. Joshua?
Hi, I'm Josh Vanderberg, and I'm running for village trustee. I've been a resident of Chicago for the Chicago area for about 30 years, and me and my family have lived in Oak Park for the last 13. My wife and I have raised 3 amazing children here, and we are incredibly grateful for the inclusiveness and love that this community has shown our children when in other communities they might have received bullying and worse. I will never, ever compromise on those values. I am currently a sitting member of a citizen commission. I funded a business here, and I've embarked on a unique brand of data-driven leadership over the last 10 years in Oak Park. I'm called to leadership in Oak Park because I think the character of Oak Park is changing and the people are the character. Rising costs are forcing our families out and making it hard for people to consider retiring here. So I have a forward-looking vision for Oak Park that involves smart growth, investing in our people, and doubling down on the things that make Oak Park great. Thank you.
Thank you. Jenna, you'll have our first question. What ideas do you have for helping smaller and locally owned businesses survive and thrive in Oak Park?
Thank you so much for the question. I'm glad to start with a question far from my field of expertise. I don't have a business background, but I do have a strong belief that our local businesses are an integral part of our not just our economy, but our community. And I understand how important it is for us to have strong local businesses to carry part of our tax burden. And so although most of our taxes don't go through the village board budget, we do have some leverage power to increase revenue through sales taxes. And so there's multiple imperatives to supporting our small businesses. In terms of ideas, I would very much prefer to defer to experts in that area, but I would like to see maybe some growth in citizen commissions of local volunteers who have that kind of expertise, either running businesses or consulting and advising businesses, because I would, look to the experts to help with the that kind of support.
Thank you. Lucia?
I think we need to focus on primarily 2 things. One is streamlining the permitting process for new businesses so that they understand very clearly what all the steps are, what all the paperwork is, and who at Village Hall helps support this process. We have an amazing village staff, and they are really there to help. And I think making small businesses, new businesses aware of that help is a good first step. But in addition to that, although we've got very diverse business districts, one thing they all need is strong infrastructure. And so what I would do in the new term is support the infrastructure projects that we already have planned. The Oak Park Avenue Streetscape project, which looks like it's going to be delayed a year, but still happening in the next term, as well as the Streetscape project that's being planned along the Chicago Avenue business corridor.
Thank you. Jim?
Thank you. Well, first and foremost, I think keeping taxes predictable and stable is probably the most impactful thing the village board can do to support small business. And it is the single greatest thing. So remember that commercial buildings pay about 2.5 times the property tax that single family homes do. So they pay a lot of tax, and it's very impactful to their bottom lines. Large businesses don't seem to have problems absorbing those fees, those taxes, but smaller businesses struggle. Again, mention some of the other things to mention would be reducing barriers, I think would be in the permitting process, certainly in the fee process for smaller businesses if possible, zoning approvals, if we could streamline that, make it easier. Also, I think we need to focus on areas where small businesses tend to congregate, such as east side of North Avenue, Chicago Avenue, Harrison Street, Roosevelt Road. And those are the things we need to focus on. Thank you.
Thank you. Josh?
Yeah, so I want to echo what some of the other people have said. One of the biggest pieces of feedback I get from the small business community, especially when starting up a business, is the difficulty and kind of sometimes the persnicketiness of the process in terms of holding things up. So I would like to see that streamlined and have more of a concierge service that helps businesses get to open. One of the things that I think that people miss a lot when they talk about economic development is the fact that residential density also drives economic development. So I live in South Oak Park, which is a very dense place, and we have two independent, very thriving business districts down here, the Arts District and Southtown. And it's that density that really focuses around that. So I'd like to see, as we start making strategic investments in streetscaping and economic development in the community, that we also look at upzoning those neighborhoods so that we have the residents that really create that kind of walkable nature that we all love about Oak Park, and create the people who are going to be, the people who come to those businesses.
Thank you. GBK?
Yeah, this might sound, like a repeat, but I definitely want to focus on our economic vitality. I want to make sure that we continue to make our small businesses more attractive to our community, but also to those that are commuting to our areas by working on our streetscapes, by also working on our retention and recruitment, making sure that there's opportunities for current small business owners, but also that we are a place that's attractive to new business owners. I want to make sure that we're also focusing on our Meepy Weebies, which is our minority-owned businesses and our women-owned businesses, and see how do we continue to make this an attractive place, not just for our regular run-of-the-mill, but also those that are interested in starting up something new. I also want to talk about how do we create a kind of like a blanket tax that goes into these taxing districts that could go directly towards small businesses, which would help them from having to always come back to us, but also have their own pot of money that can be used to build up and make repairs and things of that nature for the small businesses.
Thank you. Lucia, you're going to get this next question first. What are your thoughts on the large number of open police officer positions at the Oak Park Police Department?
So certainly the staffing shortages that we're experiencing at the police department are concerning, and something that I am very much paying attention to, but not something that's unique to our police department. So I think we really tackle this problem in two ways. I think the board needs to ensure that the police chief has all the resources she needs to implement a really robust recruitment program, so that we are recruiting officers in a way that brings us the best and the brightest in terms of new officers and lateral hires. But secondly, I think we really need to focus on finishing the police station. That's something that's been on the village board's radar, for several years. And I think attracting really great talent, I think, is really going to depend on ensuring that they have a place to come and work that meets their needs, where they can train and they can be really the best public safety experts that they can possibly be.
Thank you. Jim?
I think fully staffing the police department is critical to assure proper patrol coverage and response times. I know we've operated with 30% deficit for the last few years. It's better now, and it's improving, and it's continuing to improve. I want to see the community policing model reestablished and reinvigorated in Oak Park. I think that's important. and I'd like to see that as a part of the return of staffing. And also the patrol division is another thing we used to have in terms of traffic for traffic patrols. I don't think we have that. It's been disbanded. So that would be a good thing to have. I also support, of course, the construction and the occupying village, the police facility within 3 years of being elected. I would marshal that through. I want to get that done, and I don't want to waste any time. Thank you.
Thank you. Josh?
Yeah, so I mean, I want to echo everything that we've heard here. I think there's a general consensus on the board right now, and probably among most of the candidates here, that this is concerning and it's something that needs to be addressed. And the things that we're going to do to address it, I think across the board, what we just talked about is, basically making sure that the police chief has all the tools that she needs to recruit and retain quality staff. And I think, that's another thing we need to focus on, is that we're not just recruiting staff to recruit staff. We need to find the right people. I think people in Oak Park realize that our police department is special, that it is sensitive to the community, and that we shouldn't just be rushing out to find bodies just for the sake of it. We need to get the right people. We need to fund the police department. It's a huge issue for recruitment. It's a pretty dire facility, and we really do need to replace that. I also want to see us work on the alternatives calls for service program, what's now called ECHO, and see that out and see how that can help fill some of the gap.
Thank you. GBK?
Thank you. You might hear some of the same repeat answers, but I'm the liaison for the Citizens Police Oversight Commission, so I've had an opportunity to talk and work with officers firsthand, as well as with our consultants, to figure out how do we enact better opportunities for our officers to do their jobs, making sure that they're not going out on needless calls, making sure that if it is a mental health situation, that we are utilizing things like the mental health task force that we helped to stand up, and also that ECHO task force that we put together. We also should be talking about how do we create a more conducive work-life balance. It's something I worked on before, which was making sure that we had better hours for our officers. Another thing that we worked on was community engagement, making sure our community knows who our officers are, so that we can make for a more friendly interaction. But also what we worked on behind the scenes were our salaries and our benefits for officers, making sure that they get the mental health care that they need, but also making sure that they are compensated well for the work that they're doing.
Thank you. Jenna?
I'd like to start by highlighting my enthusiasm for the alternate response, or the ECHO program, and I'd really like to see it through, support it in ways that maybe, we don't see now, but I don't want to give up on it in case, we have some learning to do. But I find it to be a great plan in terms of maybe reorganizing and better using our resources until we can fill the staff vacancies. As was mentioned, it's a national sort of shortage of police recruits, and so it's not unique to Oak Park. And I just realized that, or have learned that it's true in fire departments as well. And so while we might not be able to control that, I agree that we want to be looking for recruiting and supporting recruits who want to be in Oak Park and are, committed to potentially returning, and hopefully returning to our community policing model when we have the appropriate resources to do that. And I guess thank you. I ran out.
Okay. Jim, you're going to get this next question first. This past November, 85% of Oak Park voters supported a non-binding referendum on adopting initiative rights, demonstrating approval for this tool. Given the public's approval, do you support establishing initiative rights in Oak Park?
Thank you. Yes, I do support that. Probably one of the few trustees or former trustees that would support that. I think it's the ballot question received 85% approval. First of all, that's important. And I want to say it's not about, really. It's not about sidelining the village board or upending thoughtful discussions. It's not about that. It's about if the village board ignores or doesn't address something, there's a mechanism in place, which is very democratic, to allow the residents to bring something forth. And I just think it makes all the sense in the world. It's not going to be our undoing. it will, and I supported this when I first heard of it. It just made sense. So it enables the public to act, and the public should act. It's a tool in the toolbox of democracy, and I just think it's not for this board. It's for what happens 10, 20, or 30 years from now that we need to be aware of, and it's going to be effective for. Thank you.
Thank you. Josh? You're still unmuted.
Unmute. Can I
There
get
you
my
go.
15 seconds back?
We'll let you go.
Okay, so I support looking into an initiative process. I think the devil is going to be in the details there. I've looked at the Arlington Heights program, and I think it has a lot of guardrails and controls that I think make it effective, but it's also never actually been used by Arlington Heights either. So I think you need to make sure that we have careful controls and guide rails so we don't get things that happen like the RCV initiative, where you have very large and complex language that people can't really absorb. And there's a lot of detail behind the scenes and legal qualifications that the board had actually already worked through and that were overridden that are going to create a real legal mess for us going forward. So I would like to avoid that, but also take in the spirit of we want to make sure that we're not missing issues that the citizens think are important. And so to the extent that we can create an initiative process that has guide rails, but also make sure that if there's something big that the village board is missing, that we're taking that on.
Thank you. GBK?
Yeah. This will be, like I said, kind of like a repeat, but yeah, I believe that these type of initiatives are great for our communities, but they have to be implemented in a way that allows to have certain guardrails around this. We need to make sure that our village form of government can actually support something like this. We have to make sure that it's actually legal and something that we can do here in Oak Park, because currently that's where we're at, is it's not something that we can legally do. So we have to make sure that we have the infrastructure built around it to support something like this. I do believe that we have a board that's currently willing to listen to all of our residents. There's been very few, if any, opportunities where I've seen our board actually shut something down and not at least take it to an agenda item. So I do also believe that there has to be a level of trust and balance put into that, because that's what we were elected to do by our constituents here in Oak Park.
Thank you. Jenna?
Yeah, so the initiative on the ballot was advisory, and because it received 85% of the vote, as Jim mentioned, it's 24,685 votes, which even if we include the registered voters who didn't vote, that's still a 62% of voters. So that's still a majority, and I'm not willing to throw that away, despite, some concerns about how it could be misused or abused, right? We need to be listening to the community. And I think as somebody who values people power, I don't want to brush off, such a resounding advisory referendum. The most compelling concerns against a binding referendum, I think, to adopting an initiative rights is really rooted in fear and distrust of the electorate, which honestly, given the national context, makes sense. And given, misinformation and disinformation, how that can sort of take hold, it's not unreasonable to worry about the ways in which that kind of power could be exploited and undermined. So I would be thinking about the kind of guardrails to put in place to make sure that whenever it is voted on, if we do move to that step, with the most clarity possible, and that it can never be used to remove rights, take away anyone's rights.
Thank you. Lucia?
Yeah, I would certainly echo the need for appropriate safeguards. There are actual, real concerns, I think, that are, legitimately applied to an issue such as this and an initiative such as this. Village staff, the village board, we have a fairly unique and a pretty detailed perspective on what the village budget looks like, what other priorities we have before us, the timing of those priorities, staff capacity to put forth certain plans and programs and initiatives. All of these things are sort of all the ingredients to make any sort of ballot initiative really successful and any policy or program that's passed at the board table really successful. And that's not something that the general public has or really should have, I would expect to have access to. And so I think there's a reason why we have this information at the village board table and why we need to be, charged with diving deep into these issues. So with the appropriate safeguards, I would be willing to look into it further.
Thank you. Josh, you're going to be first on this next question. When voting on approval for major redevelopment proposals, how much should the village board follow the recommendations of the Historic Preservation Committee, the Plan Commission, and existing zoning?
Yeah, so one of the platforms that I'm running on is to reform zoning. And one of the things that I'd like to do is I'd like to make zoning clearer so that we rely less on variances and we create a more streamlined process that works with community feedback to get a process to yes. I think what we have right now is a more adversarial process where people don't really know what can be built in a particular location, and developers don't as well. And that creates kind of fear and an adversarial process. So I'd like to see us streamline and encode what we're going to allow in areas and depend less on variances and focus on that feedback, making sure that the development that we do fits Oak Park and that we improve that development through that process and not just see that as a process that's kind of there to obstruct or to stop some development.
Thank you. GBK?
Yeah, I pretty much agree with that. I believe that we do have to really look at our zoning and making sure that we open up some zoning. Being a longtime resident here, I started off in an apartment building, with my family and my wife and kids as we started to build into Oak Park. And what that was we had a apartment building on one block of Oak Park, and we were the only two apartments that were on that block. And what that allowed us to do was be really close to public transportation, be really close to the schools that we wanted to be by. But what I noticed was we were priced out pretty quickly because there was no other ones like that anywhere near us. So what I do think is we need to develop smarter, not bigger. So making sure that there are opportunities to build different types of housing structures throughout Oak Park to address that missing middle, but also see when are the right projects to actually build higher, kind of like what we agreed on Roosevelt. You need to see when there are things like the 801 project that just make perfect sense for us. And why stop it at, 5 stories when you could go to 7 and offer more opportunities?
Thank you. Jenna?
I agree with a lot of what Josh and Chibike said. I do also support zoning reform to allow us to build more and more density. I also think clarity of process is a really good point with all of our processes. We want to make sure that folks know how to engage so that they can. Because the question mentioned taking advice and from the commissions, I just want to also add on that I would value the contribution and expertise and insight from other commissions as well, the Aging and Communities, Disability, Transportation. We have a wealth of knowledge and expertise among volunteers in this village, and all of this does intersect with housing and development. And so I would not want to leave anyone who's giving their time and expertise out of the process. And yeah, I do support more development. So I don't know if there's going to be another question on that coming up. So I look forward to it if it is.
Thank you. Lucia?
So I see this as really a two-part question. One is how much the village board should rely on historic preservation and the plan commissions, and then separately, how much we should rely on zoning. So for the commissions, those are two commissions that actually issue decisions. Those are decision-making commissions, which is different than most of our commissions, which act in a true advisory capacity. I think the board should rely heavily on the expertise of those commissions. They tend to be technical commissions, meaning commissions that have technical levels of expertise, and they really do a deep dive into the applications and the issues that come before them. The second piece is zoning. So zoning is by ordinance, and not even the village board is above the law. So if we have a zoning code in place, And we should be making zoning decisions according to that code. We should not be on an ad hoc basis chipping away at the ordinance when we don't like the way a particular zoning provision applies to an issue. So I think we should rely on the zoning code pretty strictly.
Thank you. Jim?
Yes, so I think there's a balance that we have to strike between the decisions given to us by those commissions and what constituents offer. And keeping in mind that a lot of times the constituents within a 2 or 3 block radius tend to have very strong opinions of a development one way or the other. And I do listen to the commissions, and I've voted against decisions, I mean, on occasion, and I think that's a normal process when we consider a wider array than they do. They're looking at the technical adherence to certain requirements, and we are looking at the broader appeal of development in the community and what other things offset that. So we're doing that. Zoning, I'm up for. I'm interested in looking into getting zoning updated and reviewed, and certainly it should be looked at very carefully moving ahead, especially with the missing middle that we discussed. Thank you.
Thank you. GBK, you'll get this next question first. What does Oak Park Village government currently do well, and what are the biggest areas of opportunity?
Yeah, I think what Oak Park government does really well is we listen to our community, right? We've created so many different ways to engage with our community through things like Engage Oak Park. We have our commissions, our advisory boards. We have ways in which President Skaman has put together task force. So we really try to listen to the heart of our community and understand, hey, this is something that's important to us. But when it also comes to that, like I said, we're a town of 52,000, and we've got 52,001 voices. So it's hard to hear everybody when everyone has an opinion on everything. So sometimes I think it's hard to get the streamlined, answer to what makes the most sense for us. So I think sometimes we get in our own way of getting to the answer or the root of what we want to solve. But I think it just takes a really careful listener, and sometimes you need to just know when to shut your mouth and listen. So that's what I try to do most, is listen to our community and see what I can come back with to the board.
Thank you. Jenna?
The question is, what does the village do well, and what the
What the biggest areas of opportunity?
biggest areas of opportunity? I'm impressed with so much of what our village currently does, has accomplished. And I think some of the things that I would highlight in terms of those accomplishments are the ways in which we do live into our values. I think the board works really hard. They've gotten a lot done this past session. I'm always really impressed with the staff and how hard they work every time I've engaged, either through, a community engagement event or working one-on-one with a staff member. They're brilliant and they're hardworking, and some of the things that we've done together around, distributing gun locks and public education around gun safety, I've had a really positive experience. I think the biggest areas of opportunity at this moment are taking some of our really great plans, Vision Zero, climate action, but the bike plan, and then implementing them with efficiency and urgency.
Thank you. Lucia?
I just want to add one thing. I'll start out by adding one thing to my answer for the last question. Although I think we should be following the zoning code, I certainly don't think it isn't above revision. I just don't think we should be trying to revise it sort of on an ad hoc basis as cases and agenda items come before the board. I think we should revise the code itself should the board choose to do so. One thing this community does well, I think, is grassroots organization. And I think, one of the best views of that across the community is sitting at the board table and watching things like OPCAN, implement the climate coaches program, and then the village later adopted and lend its support behind it. One thing I think that's an opportunity for improvement is I'd really like to see a sort of step into the 21st century with respect to language access. I've been a longtime supporter and advocate for translation services for government resources. We just passed our first language access policy, which I'm very proud of. And I want to remain on the board to ensure that we roll that out.
Thank you. Jim?
Thank you. I think village government has done a great job in the last few years in getting better every year with transparency. The problem, if there is one, is that the public doesn't always know where to find the information or how to best become involved in the process. And that's an issue. I support making government data more accessible online, including voting records, voting attendance, meeting transcripts, and other transparent engagement with the public. I think that we could push for better communications moving forward, and I think that there is an issue with that, as we occasionally get blindsided by policy changes. I think with the leaf collection and the parking policies in the past have kind of blindsided the public. Even the discussion about salary changes blindsided the public. There needs to be more and better communication, and they're getting better. Thank you.
Thank you. Josh?
I think the things that we do well are kind of the bread and butter services that, the streets and sanitation, police and fire and so forth. There are just a ton of details that are the vast majority of what our village does for us that just, kind of work behind the scenes because we have excellent, well-paid staff like our village manager. I also think Oak Park does a tremendous job of living its values. And I think, President Skaman has done a great job of rallying the community and rallying the board and other boards around the community to support our values and to double down on our commitment to living our values in the face of a new administration. Opportunities, I think, Oak Park is it's an older bedroom community, and has some challenges adapting to the future, providing safety for our pedestrians and bicyclists. So I would like to see Vision Zero implemented, and I'd like to see our zoning codes adapted to be able to provide the affordable housing that we need for our children to be able to live here and for retirees to be able to stay in the community they love.
Thank you. Jenna, you're going to get this next question first. In light of our political climate, how do you propose the village deal with recent mandates regarding ICE's sweeps for undocumented people?
I'm really glad that this question came up. It's been something I've been thinking about since the election, one of many fears that is already being realized. Village specifically, I'm thinking of two things. First, protecting data and anything that could potentially be used to harm anybody because of who they are and why the reasons that they're being targeted. And the second thing would be something I've mentioned already or in other forums. I think we should get rid of our surveillance cameras. I think it's ripe for abuse, and they're not used to keep us actually safe, but just to sort of quell our fear. And I think because our systems are connected, they work because they're on. And so for our neighbors in Berwyn and Cicero here in Oak Park and across the west side, I don't want Oak Park to be a part of anything that could be used to harm any community. And in this case, it would be our immigrant community. So I think they should come down.
Thank you. Lucia?
Yeah, I think the first step is a step that the village recently took, which is to issue a statement really affirming the village's commitment to upholding the tenets of the Welcoming City Ordinance and truly being a community that is open and diverse, without regard to citizenship status. And so I was very happy to see that that's on the village website for anybody who wants to view that. But then I think the village needs to take also a more practical tact. And we have in the works plans to host some Know Your Rights sessions so that we can get some very practical information, answer questions for individuals who may be at risk to these sweeps. But this is really, sort of where even the language access stuff folds in, because those sessions really are only worthwhile and helpful if the individuals who need the information can understand the information. And so I think this is an area where we're going to have to pull a couple of different resources to really be supportive.
Thank you. Jim?
Well, just a real simple answer. I think that the village could take some time and uh, take a vote and reaffirm the welcoming city ordinance. I think that would send a very strong, clear message. And I know I give all the credit to the village staff for organizing the event last week at Unity Temple. It was a very nice event. But actually reaffirming that and saying, these are our principles and we're all going to vote on it. I just think that would be a good way to advance the needle and make it very clear where we stand. Uh, and again, there's nothing that clarifies better than a vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Josh?
Yeah, I mean, my father was an immigrant. He came to the United States when he was 5 with 7 siblings and his parents. And they lived the American dream. And I really don't understand this tenor of anti-immigration that's out there. Like, anti-immigration to me is anti-American. Like, this is what we are. And so I 100% support our welcoming city ordinance and reaffirming that, and sticking to our guns on that. That might mean that we lose some funding or something. And I don't know. We need to look to the state and regional sources of funding. We also need to look to the state and region for legal protections to try and stop that from happening. I also support the Know Your Rights sessions that we're doing to inform residents of their rights should they encounter, immigrations. And I want to say that I really, really want to let people know that we cannot be complicit with the barbaric and cruel deportation processes that we see out there. There's enforcing the law, and there's just what they're doing right now is just wholly unacceptable.
Thank you. Chibike?
Just want to really quickly go back to the last question. I didn't answer it fully. So we created transparency. We've worked on sustainability with electrification. We've put more dollars into those funds. Vision Zero mental health task force that brought about ECHO. We've created equity within our leadership and our celebrations here in Oak Park. So when it comes to the migrants, I believe, one is immigration and first generation son of immigrants. I completely am here for our migrants here in Oak Park. Our get together at Unity Temple, affirming with all of our other governing bodies the legal access that we give to the migrants and making sure that we had a set aside for dollars, making sure that we're protecting the data, which is what our Citizens Police Oversight Commission is supposed to be in charge of, and making sure that outside agencies aren't taking advantage of our cameras, making sure that Know Your Rights is available, also using our online resources to make sure that we don't just put our migrants in one situation that could potentially be dangerous for them in the future, but making sure that online they do have access in ways in which that they can access that data. Also, thank you to Trustee Robinson, who made sure that we had this language access so that our website is actually transferable, so that you can see this in 13 different languages.
Thank you. Lucia, you'll have you'll answer this question first. What changes, if any, would you favor in the way the village does its budgeting and fiscal planning, and why?
So I have been on the finance committee for about the last 1 to 2 years. I was put on the finance committee by President Skaman a little over a year ago. And so I have been, especially focused on the village budget and the village budget process. I think there are a couple of things that we should do to change the process itself. I think the finance committee should meet year round. Right now, the finance committee starts meeting in about September. I think we should be meeting year round, and although we're not discussing the budget year round, for those months that we are not discussing, the new budget, I think what we should be doing is reviewing the quarterly financial reports. In addition to that, I think we should start discussing the budget earlier. Right now, we start discussing the budget about third quarter. I think we should move that up an entire quarter. And then lastly, I think we should sort of flip the way we discuss the budget. I think we should discuss the discretionary portions of the budget first, and then those portions of the budget that we really don't have control over, pension payments, for example, should be discussed sort of at the end, because we don't have much input and we can't really change those.
Thank you. Jim?
A couple things. So I've always advocated for really an extensive and thorough discussion of where the money gets spent. And that's just the way I was brought up, because my background is finance, and going through a budget line by line. It's awful, it's tedious, but that's the way it's always been done. And the village in the past, I think, has kind of moved away from that. It was very effective. We would go through and question, and the department heads would answer, and it was really good. So, a couple of the things that I will mention, I'll bring in right now that we're looking at projects right now in Village Hall renovation, and I would avoid bundling projects that inflate costs, such as pairing the police station with the Village Hall renovations. And I also think that we should be looking strongly at a budgeting task of, if you're going to do a renovation project, you talk about the budget first. What is the budget? What are people going to afford? And stick with it. And then talk about how you can fill the expenditure side. And you work backwards. This is the wrong way to do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Josh?
Yeah, so one of the things that I would like to see in the budgeting process is, well, I'm not sure if this is necessarily budgeting, but it is kind of longer term, is thinking about expanding our non-property tax sources of revenue. So I think sometimes we focus on property taxes a lot when over 50% of the revenue that the village has comes from non-property tax revenue. So if we can get our village staff and the board focusing on those things, I think over long term, that's beneficial. I agree with Lucia that budgeting should be kind of more continuous and start earlier, although I'll defer to her as the expert, having been through that process. I've only watched it from afar. Also, I think post-COVID, we're finding that the cost environment is high and the interest rate environment is huge. So we really do need to crack down on some of these projects and figure out what we can afford up front and manage towards that, as opposed to just looking at, all sorts of 3D designs and so forth and getting carried away with things and then finding out that we have huge sticker shock in the end.
Thank you. GBK?
Yeah, I believe that, one, that we need to make sure that we are relieving some of that tax burden and not necessarily putting it all on the residents. I think, that's one thing that we continuously do is we utilize our that lack of having not enough commercial businesses to really help relieve that. So how do we do that? I think we need to get better at understanding, okay, what is actually going to help drive some of this down? I think we've looked at it a little bit through our economic vitality and seeing what type of businesses we can truly attract. And it doesn't always need to be another high rise. I think there's other opportunities. I also do think that we can work better at how we look at the finance budget. I was on the finance commission and we had great discussions. Me, Jim, and Ravi had really good discussions on how do we make this easier for the rest of our residents. But like Lucia said, I do think this is something that does need to happen year round. That would give us more of an opportunity to not just jump at what we think is an opportunity to spend money really quick, but to wisely think, hey, is this something that makes sense for us now, or is this something that we should be waiting a little bit longer on and taking some more in-depth thought and not just doing things on a knee-jerk reaction and understanding that this is fluid.
Thank you. Jenna?
Well, the budget is one of the primary responsibilities of the village board. And so I think I just want to say that I see it as a reflection of values, and it should always be sort of checked against our priorities and board goals. And with that, as part of this process, is one of the many processes that, as a non-sitting board member, as just a citizen, could be clarified better for the public, and maybe some even like education around the process, because as a viewer watching the process and looking at the documents, it's easy to get a little bit lost. The other piece that I think could be improved, or we could add clarity to, is that sometimes as I'm watching the board deliberate on certain decisions, we see and you all see the choices that the staff present, but we don't get to see how the staff got there. And I think more detail in that part of the process, specifically with budget, but really more generally as well, could be really helpful to arrive at the best possible decisions.
Thank you. Jim, you're going to start the next question first. How should the village address the growing unhoused population of Oak Park?
Thank you. That's a great question. And I here are my thoughts. A couple of things. First of all, when we talk about affordable housing, just generally as a topic, that I think the description needs to include more appropriately also the unhoused, because that's part of the continuum of housing in Oak Park. We have an unhoused population. When we look at what we've got in Oak Park, in terms of the unhoused, it does require our constant vigilance. And what I've seen is the village be very, very outgoing and welcoming, which is great. And I agree with it with the migrant situation. But when it comes to the unhoused, the same people are on the street for year after year. And I do think, and it's been mentioned at the board meetings, we need to reach out, and there are efforts to do that right now underway, but we really need to focus on what's the difference. We've got people that are migrants, and they need to be cared for well, and we also have people that are unhoused, and they also require those services. Thank you.
Thank you. Josh?
So, I mean, I think there are two aspects of this. Relatively short term is that we should be working to create a solid funding source for our partners. So we have funded Housing Forward and created a dedicated source for the number of unhoused that we know are on the streets in Oak Park right now. And that's a great first step. But this has been done on a relatively ad hoc basis, and I think we need to commit to putting this to be a budget item. If we're going to be dedicated to taking care of these folks and making sure that we're not leaving people out on the streets, we need to fund that as a high priority. Longer term, we know that high housing prices correlate with high homelessness. It's a fact that's seen across the nation. So we need to work to get our housing situation more affordable. And what that means is building more housing in Oak Park. And so that means modifying our zoning to allow more density, to allow missing middle and so forth. And I think that will longer term address the unhoused situation.
Thank you. GBK?
Yeah, when it comes to addressing our unhoused, I think that it is what truly does take a village. I think that one, we need to continue to work with the partners that we have been working with. Housing Forward has been doing the best job that they can to stand up, helping the unhoused and giving us the opportunities that they see available for us to continue to not only fund them, but find other ways in which we can help, but also seeing, hey, how do we help to connect you with the surrounding communities, which are also going through some of the same crises. So I think working with them to see, okay, what can we do to help stand up Berwyn's unhoused situation will also help us, because we end up seeing that we are working with some of the same individuals. So how do we, make that more stabilized? How do we also fund this? Can we see about budgeting, like Josh said, budgeting more dollars towards these opportunities and seeing, okay, if we do have these vacancies in certain buildings or certain churches and have partners that are willing to work with us through the process, then we can get through these problems. But it does take a more collaborative effort than us just throwing money at it. We do need to also find places to put the unhoused.
Thank you. Jenna?
I'll echo what was said about the amazing work that Housing Forward does, and I fully support, the continued partnership and supporting their work. They're the experts. Linda knows what she's doing. And in a Wednesday Journal article, she was quoted as talking about this alarming rise in homelessness in Oak Park, but across suburban Cook County, West Side, and that is tied to rising housing costs and lack of housing, specifically lack of affordable housing. And so we do need to urgently address the housing shortage, and I think modify and strengthen our inclusionary housing ordinance to do so that we get more housing stock in Oak Park, more affordable housing stock. It'll help bring the cost down. There'll be more diverse options for folks who want to move into Oak Park, who want to stay in Oak Park. And that is one factor. It's not the only factor, but it's one factor that will contribute to relieving and hopefully bringing down the homelessness population.
Thank you. Lucia?
Yeah, I mean, I really agree with Trustee Enya's comment about sort of having the regional perspective for an issue like providing supports to address our unhoused population. Interestingly, both nonprofits in Oak Park, Beyond Hunger and Housing Forward, that I think are, provide supports to this segment of the community, they serve multiple zip codes. And so having the regional perspective, I think, is really key. But I think for our efforts here in Oak Park, I think that we have to make sure that we're allocating funds for more than just space for temporary shelter, but also two other elements that Housing Forward has brought forward to the board recently for funding. And one is the need for street outreach services. And the second is the need for wraparound services so that individuals who are brought into temporary shelters then have a plan to move beyond that and get to more stable permanent housing.
Thank you. Josh, you're going to have this next question first. What are your priorities for major capital projects in the near future and long term?
Well, so I mean, I think there are a couple of major capital projects in the budget right now. So the Oak Park Avenue, it's called the streetscaping, but it's actually a major renovation of the utilities and underpinnings of that. So one of the problems is that we put that out for bid and nobody took us up on that and came back with a bigger price. The Village Hall and the Police Department are also major priorities as well. So like I said previously, I think we're going to have to get creative in this kind of inflationary environment and figure out ways to economize and to find ways of decreasing those costs. But I mean, those are the big ones that are on our radar. I also think we have a number of sewer projects. There's areas of Oak Park that tend to flood quite a lot. And I found it's like from 2015 or something like that. There's a huge plan about all these projects that we can use to address our sewer system to help improve that. I think we should look at that and try and invest in that, and also the alleyways as well in Oak Park.
Thank you. GBK?
I thought by being second, I'd be able to not run into repeats, but you like looked at my cheat sheet. So no, I wholeheartedly agree. I think one of the main projects that we need to worry about is making sure that our police station is renovated and brought up to the standards of the 21st century. I think that there is a lot of work that needs to be done there. Addressing our streets, as a former streets and forestry employee, talking about getting our streets back to where they need to be in our alleys is a huge thing. We consistently see people wanting to move up on the list to get their alleys done. We also talk about our sewers. Our sewers are a huge thing because we're also dealing with a lot of lead within Oak Park and a lot of leaking water. So we lose, I mean, thousands and thousands of gallons of water because of bad piping. So we have a lot of projects that we do need to work on, and we have continual flooding, especially if you're on the north side of Oak Park, like my parents are and a lot of other Oak Parkers are. It's a problem, and it's something that we do need to address sooner than later.
Thank you. Jenna?
I think I have to repeat again, the prioritization of the new police station. We can't keep kicking that down the road. Also, the Julian Streetscape along Chicago Avenue is one that I'm excited about. As we're talking about like sewer infrastructure and that kind of thing, I just would maybe want to chime in that to do so as that would impact or address the most impacted first. So folks who are most in need should always come first. And when I'm thinking about like more of the green infrastructure projects, I would want to highlight the same, that at least 40% of investment should be going to those most impacted, mostly by the effects of climate change, and that we always sort of like keep that in the conversation when we are prioritizing really big investment projects.
Thank you. Lucia?
So I agree with a lot of what's been said about the priority of projects. What I will add is I think as we plan for which projects we do and how quickly we do them and what we do first, one of the things that we have to really keep in mind as well is financing these projects. And so several weeks ago, I did ask village staff to come back with a property tax assessment for the budget placeholder for the village hall remodel and the police station. And so as we make things like construction choices and design choices that will help build out and inform the details of these projects, I think what has to really be done first is understanding what the financing structure is going to be and how that impacts the taxpayer cost burden, because these are projects that are really meant to be community centered and helpful for the community, and that sort of takes away some of that when they are so cost prohibitive that we end up pushing people out of this community because they can't afford it.
Thank you. Jim?
Well, that's actually a very good point, and I agree that the discussion of any sort of a project, the budget needs to be discussed in advance, and it can't be delayed. You can't have a discussion without a budget because you have a witch's brew of projects that are going to go into that. A meditation room, changing the lighting, reconfiguring, moving council chambers to the basement, excavating the foundation. It's going to be a $150 million project the way it's looking. And the village is kind of lurching toward that right now. Hopefully not. Hopefully we can change it. I don't advocate for that, but I would say that based on what I could look at, if you have a $150 million project financed at say 5% over 20 years, you're looking at a levy increase of somewhere between 25 and 33%, a village portion of our levy increase between 20. That's extensive. We have to understand what people can afford and what people actually want. I would focus on accessibility of Village Hall and do that and build the police station, understanding it needs to be done, build the police station, but accessibility issues only should be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you. I think this will be our last question, and Chibike, you'll start it off for us. How important is it to you to work together as a group while speaking your opinion and disagreeing with others in a respectful way while on the board?
It's extremely important that we are able to have functioning conversations because you cannot continue to build relationships. You can't continue to move forward if you're not able to listen and not able to have your voice heard. So it's always important for me to make sure that we come together, even through our differences, so that we can at least hear each other and understand where each other is coming from. When we first came on 4 years ago, we came on the heels of a board that wasn't always listening to each other and had a lot of contention. And what I think we were able to do this time around and why we were able to get so many things accomplished was because we were able to listen to each other's differences, but also understand where each other was coming from, and being able to put Oak Parkers first. And that is something that I maintain is one of my strengths, is working together with my peers and understanding that even though we may have differences and challenges, we all know what we came here to do, and that was to make sure that we put Oak Park first.
Thank you. Jenna?
The question was, how important is it to me to be collaborative on a
Yes. And while, obviously speaking your opinion, and if you disagree with your colleagues.
Perfect. I think it's extremely important to accomplish anything. And I agree with Trustee Enya that there's common goals among leaders in Oak Park, and keeping those at front of mind and reminding ourselves of both our goals, our values, and our priorities when there are differences is an effective way to go through a process so that it's productive. Difference of opinions is good. It's healthy. You can get to a better outcome by, hashing things out. I try to be really intentional and thoughtful with decision making, and I seek out opposing opinions, and with people with different backgrounds than myself to sort of check myself. And I try to lead through connection, and that is even with people who I disagree with. And so I think with keeping in front of mind the ultimate goals, which is keeping Oak Park safe and inclusive, we can accomplish things even when there's differences.
Thank you. Lucia?
I think it's incredibly important, and I have worked really hard to build collaborative working relationships with each of my colleagues at the board table. Even over the course of an election, we had Jim leave the board table and Trustee Straw join in 2023. And so even with that slight change in the board composition, it's always really been very, very important to me that we have a collaborative working style that is very respectful of our differences, which is the challenge, right? Because I think to be respectful of differences sort of then tests the limits of potential conflict. But we have an amazing village manager who has actually invested and asked us to invest time in some team building exercises, having some experts come in and talk to us to help us really understand what's important to us and why. And I think that's really gone a long way to achieving a really productive discourse at the board table.
Thank you. Jim?
Well, I've had the distinct privilege of being able to collaborate with probably the largest number of trustees in the history of the Oak Park Village Board because of my time on the board and how it happened to span a number of so many different, like 15 trustees. And I got along with every single one of them. And I really did that sitting down. I'm old fashioned in that way. We'll have a cup of coffee, sit down and discuss our differences and work things out. And it's so important because in this day and age, so much tries to get handled, even at the board. And I'm not faulting any particular board, but using texts and the text back and forth, try to get an answer. You can't change someone's opinion using a text or even an email. You have to sit down, look them in the eye, and really discuss where you stand on an issue and be open about it. And that's what I've always tried to do. That's my style. It's kind of old fashioned, but I'm going to stick with it, and it works well for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Josh?
Yeah, so I mean, I think you really have to see the village board as a collaborative team, like everybody else has highlighted. And I've been watching the village board for a while, and I think the moments of dysfunction are when that collaboration breaks down and when particular relationships break down. So I mean, that collaboration is built on relationships. And that's one of the reasons, one of the things that's pulled me into this process is I've very consciously reached out to every sitting board member and candidate to kind of start building those relationships should I be elected. And I agree with Lucia as well that, I think it sounds a little goofy, but the village board does need team building exercises. And especially once there's, when a new board is impaneled, there might be multiple new people in there. And so I think you need to be very, very intentional about that. And I think people just kind of think collaboration just kind of grows, but sometimes I think it needs to be fostered and really nurtured. And it's incredibly important.
Thank you. We will start with the closing statements now. And Jenna, you're going to be first to make the closing statement. 1 minute.
Okay, thank you again for everyone who made this forum possible, to everybody watching and to my fellow candidates. I wish we had talked a little bit more about gun violence prevention and sustainability, but I think, everything that was touched on tonight was really important. This village board has a lot of plans to support diversity and economic vitality and sustainability. What I will bring to the board table is the energy and commitment to taking action on these plans to implement all of our good, big ideas. In my work with Moms Demand Action, I've learned many important lessons about leadership and problem solving, one of which is that persistence can be a superpower. Recently, I had a conversation with someone I've known for several years here in Oak Park, and she told me that she would describe me as dogged, and that is not initially how I would typically characterize my personality, but it does accurately describe how I work on the issues that matter most to me, which are the issues that matter most to this community, right? Safety, equity, and justice. I persist in my efforts with tenacity because I understand the impact that policies can have on our lives. So thanks again to everyone for your active participation. It's essential to democracy, and I'm grateful to be in community with you.
Thank you. Lucia?
We've talked about a lot of really important issues this evening and issues that I've worked on during the course of my term, issues that I hope to continue to be able to work on in the next term. But I fully understand that these are issues that, while we'll be making decisions on them in the next 4 years, they will really impact the next 40 years. We talk about things like zoning, housing choices, capital improvement projects that would be financed likely with 20 or 30-year bonds. We're really talking about choices and the need for leaders who have that long-term perspective. I have a balanced leadership style. I try to balance sort of a pragmatic approach to assessing what the issues are, what the resources that we have available are, but also trying to keep a compassion-centered focus in listening to residents and their concerns. I have found board service to be incredibly rewarding, challenging at times, but really rewarding. And I hope to be able to continue it in the next term.
Thank you. Jim?
Just want to start by thanking everyone for listening tonight. Just a couple additional thoughts. I feel that I bring a skill set that complements and strengthens the existing board. I'm a business owner for over 30 years. I'm a CPA, I've got an MBA, and I've served the village on a long list of commissions, committees, boards. I understand the budget. how the village operates, and how to collaborate, as we just discussed, with colleagues to move things ahead in a focused and productive manner. That's one of my strengths. It's my belief that institutional knowledge and years of experience can be valuable to the community. I hope to be of service in the future to the community. You can read more about my campaign at jamestaglia.com. Thank you to the League of Women Voters, the library, and the residents for listening. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Josh?
So I love Oak Park for its walkable streets and thriving business districts. And I want to double down on that. That means investing in economic vitality. That means investing in the housing that creates affordability and supports our businesses. And I also want to implement Vision Zero, which is a program to dramatically decrease the deaths and injuries from traffic incidents in Oak Park. My kids bike to school every day. I believe it's more sustainable. It helps with our traffic, but every day I worry that are they going to be safe on their bike trip to school? I'd like to stop doing that. I want to leave Oak Park a future that's safe for everyone. And our kids are the future. I want to say my kids don't watch TV. And, when they go to pay their first bill in Oak Park, they're going to reach for the app. So as we build the future of Oak Park, I'd like to look to technology and data to build a better, more accessible place that's built for our children.
Thank you. GBK?
Yes, I am, my great grandmother was the leader of the largest women's revolution in Nigeria at the time, with 10,000 women who were fighting against taxation, against the British. I always felt that I was called to this job to lead the people and help people through tough times, but also help them in the good times. I really believe in strengthening public safety and our crisis response. I believe that we need to work on our mental health response and our accountability and accessibility to those in our village, near and far. I believe that we have to listen to the unheard voices here in Oak Park. I also believe that we do need to develop, but we need to develop smart and not always bigger. I also believe that we have to still hold strong to what equity means, because we have to do the things that we say we're going to do when we say them. So I'm asking for your vote because I do believe that we can still push forward and we have more work to do.
Thank you. Public service is the bedrock of our democracy, and we thank all the candidates, not only for their time tonight, but for choosing to run for local office. And in Oak Park, that is not an easy thing. I know that firsthand. I want to remind everyone that a recording of this event will be posted on our website and on the library's YouTube page, YouTube channel for later viewing. Early voting does start Monday, March 17th, with Election Day being Tuesday, April 1st. More election information is available on our website. And please remind your friends and neighbors and relatives to vote in this election. Local elections are important. Thank you all for your interest and your attendance tonight. And I think the Oak Park's future is in good hands here.